Hey everyone, and welcome. I'm really excited. First of all, I want to jump in and say thank you to our sponsor, Offering Tree, who is an amazing company who's really supporting yoga teachers get their offerings online. And I'm extra grateful for them today because when I made our post in the Facebook group, I said to the team over at Offering Tree, things are getting a little bit heated more than they ever do in our Facebook group. And how are you feeling about this? And their very quick reply to me was, we're 100% for this conversation and this important work. We're really looking forward to this podcast today. So I want to give a huge shout out to Offering Tree and just say, if you are thinking about a company who really cares about yoga teachers, check them out. They have free workshops, free trainings, free courses for yoga teachers. And they also have an amazing platform that will allow you to get your yoga classes online, be integrated with Zoom, all kinds of things. Next, I want to just check, how are you doing today? Oh, yes. Also, this is a discount code. So if you're checking out Offering Tree, you can get a discount for our Connected Yoga Teacher listeners as well. So I want to check in with everyone. How are you doing? If you're new here, my name is Shannon Crow. I use she, her pronouns, and I want to thank you for being here, especially if you're feeling uncomfortable in any way. What would be helpful? Would it be helpful if we shake it out, take a breath? And know that at any point you can take a break if you need to. I know a lot of you are dealing with lots of things out in the world. And so I just really appreciate that you're hanging out here. We're going to focus on Ahimsa and what that means when we take it out into the world as yoga teachers. And I also want to give a few other notes. So I'm asking myself today, how can I show up and hear other perspectives? And I have a sticky note here that helps me that says, communicate and listen to understand, not to be understood. This is one thing that I look at every time I do a podcast. And I also want to specify here that I am not an expert in vaccines, science, or people medicine. I did study science and animal medicine in college. I live with a health and science journalist. I rely heavily on the bulk, or 97% of healthcare professionals who agree that vaccines are saving lives. I just want to let you know where I'm coming from on this. I'm also friends with people who don't ever want to take the COVID-19 vaccine, who are waiting for more information and deciding if they want to take the vaccine. And I have friends who are partially and fully vaccinated, and we're friends. So I just want to say that as well, because some people were asking if I am just all for one decision here. We're going to dive into that today. I live in a country, Canada, where we have 84% of our population as fully vaccinated, and our death rate has been low in comparison with the US. The vaccine is available, and all of these things are privileges that I want to acknowledge, because there are people around the world who don't have those same privileges. I also want to tell you, and you might have heard this if you tuned in with our live with Drew Hume, that my cousin died of COVID this year before the vaccine was available. So when I see comments online that say that COVID isn't real or it's just like the flu, that feels untrue and hurtful. And so this is why I want to talk about Ahimsa today. And this is why I'm so excited about our conversation with Wolf, who we will meet in just a moment. So I'm not okay with the misinformation spreading in our health and wellness spaces. I am here if I'm missing a perspective, or if you think, well, what about this, Shannon? And something like this actually came through in language in our Facebook group. Different people were asking me, can you please stop saying vaccine hesitant or anti-vax and putting everyone in a box? And I am here for that. Let's co-create some language that feels good for everyone. So if we think of this huge spectrum of, I'm choosing not to get vaccinated, I'm choosing to get vaccinated, and the large array of difference in the middle, what language feels really good? And what language will help us to not be just two sides, polarized. What language what language feels good for you? So I don't know that yet, and I'm happy to hear from all of you in the comments to hear what language feels good. I'm working on it. And I get that labels don't feel good for some people, and other people are like, yeah, this label feels really good for me. I also want to highlight that we talked in a podcast with Drew Hume about scope of practice. I'd say go back and make sure to listen to that. And I have a very strong belief that as yoga professionals, that means we refer out when something's out of our scope of practice. So we refer to doctors, we refer to PTs. And with regards to COVID and vaccination, here in Canada, we refer to our public health and our government organizations and what they are saying. And in the US, that means we refer to the FDA and the CDC. And we ask, okay, we ask ourselves, how can we go along with these guidelines? So personally, also, I wanted to share something that I have permission to share. One of our connected yoga teacher team, who we all appreciate and love very much, has openly shared on social media that they are in stage 3 renal failure. They live in Alberta, Canada, where there was just declared a state of emergency due to full hospitals and rising COVID cases. And this team member needs a surgery and can't get it right now because of full hospitals there. And they told me that reading through different Facebook posts from the yoga community, especially, has been feeling so hurtful. So the opposite of Ahimsa again, like their health doesn't matter. And this person is at more risk, has an immunocompromising issue going on, because of kidney disease, and is waiting for surgery now. So when I look at, like, what does this have to do with yoga? Because some people have been saying to me, Shannon, stay in your lane. What does this have to do with yoga? This is why we have Wolf Terry joining us today. Let me welcome Wolf here. Thank you so much for being here, Wolf.
Oh, thank you for having me. Hello, everyone.
So I want to say, like, Wolf is joining us. She wrote an article titled "Getting Vaxxed Was My Act of Ahimsa," and was labeled the most controversial writer at Yoga Journal. And also, Wolf raised money by selling these amazing T-shirts to buy. What's that?
Pack on them. They have a wolf head and they say pack on the bottom. Wolf pack.
All of the money from these shirts went to Texas schools for PPE, and I'm so glad that you did that, and I'm so glad that I could get this cool shirt and help to raise money for teachers and students in Texas.
Yeah.
So Wolf devotes all of her time right now and has paused her paying work to do interviews with health experts to answer the questions around COVID and vaccines. And she now really focuses on talking to people who are hesitant about vaccines and who have questions. You're also a mom.
Yep.
And a retired yoga teacher I saw somewhere.
Yep, I'm retired. I'm 30.
So
retired.
Tell us, Wolf, am I missing anything else? Is there anything else you want to add to the intro? And also, like, I'd love to know how you got started with this work. Like, how has COVID or the pandemic or vaccine hesitancy affected you personally as part of that intro?
So I'm a writer. And like I said, I'm a retired yoga teacher. I retired in May 2020. I was done. And well before the pandemic, I was done. I was wiped. It was more than just the physical exhaustion and the like balancing act of everything that I was doing. I had to walk away because of the entire system. Westernized yoga has failed a lot of yoga teachers and failed a lot of yoga students, and I couldn't do it anymore. So I was like, you know what, my yoga is going to be, how I'm going to teach it is I'm going to write. So I continued to write my advice column, Wolf Wisdom, for Yoga Journal. And all of this from the time a few months after my son was born, my brother died by suicide in September of 2018. Actually, it's coming up. It's next week, the third anniversary of his death. And I became very much a vocal activist within wellness, health and wellness spaces when it came to mental health and when it came to social justice. After that, I just sort of, something clicked after I lost him. And I realized that if I wasn't using my voice and my gift of my words to help others and to keep others alive, then what was I doing with my life? So when the pandemic hit us, I started to research. I started to research pandemics in the past, and I researched masking, and I researched vaccination for well over a year. And when it came time, I wrote the essay for Yoga Journal. Vaccination was my act of Ahimsa, which was, a well cited article. It had a lot of amazing data, amazing factual research in it. And as soon as Yoga Journal posted it onto Instagram, it blew up, and the comment section became just this whole slew of anti-vax, and I will use that term, rhetoric and misinformation, and really, really harmful misinformation that was causing a lot of division. And amongst the comments were a lot of people who did identify as vaccine hesitant or somewhere in the middle or not sure or on the fence. And they were like, this is why I'm so confused, because there's so many polarizing views and both sides are so heated. And I realized, you know what? I'm the first yoga teacher to write something like this, the first. I'm the first person to publish anything like this in the yoga and wellness world and take any sort of heat for it. I was paid like pennies for that essay. And I was like, screw it. I'm going to step into this role that I made for myself, and I'm going to help bridge the gap and bring science, communication, and education into the yoga world, which I had known for a very long time was full of a lot of pseudoscience, a lot of misinformation, and a lot of people, particularly white yoga practitioners, who would turn a blind eye at a lot of things, who didn't want to, create any tension within their communities, very much the love and light type people. And then also full of a lot of, again, white yogis who were perpetuating harm and were doing things like walking into my yoga class wearing QAnon hats and trying to sell all of these products and programs and stuff to me personally after classes that were based on information that was total bogus, and ideologies that were very harmful. And in doing this work, it was never, and in writing this essay, it was never to cause an eruption from an opposing view, people who oppose vaccination, although I knew it would. It was really to help people who were on the fence or who just plain didn't understand the importance of vaccination, because we as a society up until now have been very privileged because we've benefited from science and technology our whole lives. Many of us did not have to see what polio did to communities. Many of us did not have to see the effects of smallpox, because we had vaccines. And so I wrote this article as a way to say, hey, like, here are your yogic principles. Here's the principle of ahimsa, of non harm. The more people who choose to vaccinate, the more people who get vaccinated, the more safety we're creating around vulnerable communities, people who cannot access the vaccine, people who are not yet eligible, like my toddler, older and immunocompromised people, people who are on certain treatments that cannot get vaccinated at all. It's not an option for them. It's important for us to take this step because we're protecting these people. And if there is, if we really do believe in true oneness in the yoking of all things and in being of service, being in seva to our community, then vaccination is just that. Vaccination is an act of non harm, it is an act and a layer of protection for those we care about and those we don't even know about. So that's why I chose to do it, and I encourage you to do the same. And of course, a lot of people didn't see it that way. They called me a shill for big pharma. They really, really clung to this idea that I'm a sheep and people who get vaccinated are a sheep and we're not thinking for ourselves and we're living in fear. And I said, well, you know what? We're going to have live conversations with experts within the science community and the medical communities. And we are going to extend, a hand of kindness to those who are struggling to make a decision. It was not, and it is not, continues to not be bait for, people with anti-vax sentiment or anyone who's spouting misinformation. It's not for them. It's for people who are really having a hard time making a decision, are living in communities or a part of spiritual yoga wellness communities that don't want people to get vaccinated. They don't encourage people to wear masks, and they're genuinely afraid. They don't know what to do or what to make of all the information coming from both sides. So in this way, I've been able to have some really amazing conversations with a lot of people who, many of them do identify as vaccine hesitant. And that's cool. Many are just very unsure and skeptical of everything and all sources of information. And about 9 out of 10 conversations that I've had, 9 out of 10, 90% of the conversations that I've had have resulted in people going and getting their first and then their second shot. So
I wanna highlight this because you're not trying to tell people who are saying, "Hey, I'm not getting the vaccine no matter what." You're like, "That's okay. My interviews and my stuff is not made for you. It's for people who have questions about the vaccine and who have really legit questions." Like, I've watched some of your interviews and they're so good. I love how you are connecting people with medical experts. Like, one of the things I've heard from many people is, what about fertility and the vaccine? And so you bring those experts on to talk about that.
yeah.
What Tell us, like, when you say 9 out of 10 people, that's exciting, and I saw you share something today, like, you share the wins that are happening where people feel really good about their decisions. So talk to us about how that's going.
So a lot of the time, people think that I'm getting bombarded with, mean messages from people and it's exhausting. I'm not. In fact, that's like 3 or 4 times a week. I get like really hateful, hurtful stuff. I'm in comments a lot, but it's never direct messages. Like people will rail on me in comments or their own posts or whatever. But when it comes to my personal DMs, almost all of the people who approach me who are undecided about vaccination, on the fence, vaccine hesitant, they come to me with a question, and a lot of the times those questions revolve around, hey, I heard this information from my yoga teacher. I heard this information from my friend within my yoga community, or a lot of people in my community have been passing around this article. Can you tell me if it's true? And the first thing I do is I look it up. I look up the information that they're sharing, and I vet it, and I'll be like, yeah, that doesn't seem to hold any weight here, and here's why. And I'll direct them to one of the conversations that I've had on my IGTV live. I'll direct them to an actual study that has been peer reviewed. That's a controlled randomized study. And I'll give them information from what I've gathered from experts. So I'm not a vaccine expert. I'm not a scientist. Right now, my hobby is science communication. What a hobby, guys. Let's just say it. Not too many people can be like, I'm a retired yoga teacher, but I dabble in science communication. It's weird. But having these conversations, I'm able to be like, how does it feel when you read that? Do you get a knee-jerk reaction from it? Does something feel off? When you read this, and I'll give them like a piece of factual information with data that's like easily and gently presented. When you see this, does that make you feel reassured? Does that still make you feel skeptical? And we talk about it. Like, we're back and forth in our messages, or people will have voice text conversations like Shannon and I do in our Instagram thread. And when I come up against a wall, when people are still like, this all looks really good, I have to think about it. I'm still really nervous. I don't want to be judged by people in my community for getting vaccinated. I'm like, hey, listen, you have time. Just please promise me that if you're out in public or gathering with people, you'll wear a mask, and that we can agree on. So I don't see any conversation with anyone, whether they choose to get vaccinated or not, as a failure, because 100% of the time, many of these people who are coming to me are like, yes, I will wear a mask. I practice wearing a mask. I'm not going to get, or people say, I'm never going to get vaccinated, but I am going to wear a mask. I am going to socially distance. I have a bubble and I'm not going outside of that. And it's like, okay, yeah, like, I would feel much safer for you if you got vaccinated, because I am pro-vaccination, but I'm not gonna keep, screaming at you and shaking my fist at you. There's no sense in that right now. And it's not fair to either of us to, be held hostage in that situation. So that's how those conversations go. Or people will reach out to me and be like, hey, I have a lot of vaccine hesitant people that I know, or people who are anti-vax, and I'm trying to navigate these relationships, and how do I approach them? And so we go through that, and I give them tips like, okay, they are vaccine hesitant. They're not actually afraid of the vaccine. They're afraid of that big pharma is involved. Okay, let's untangle this. Big pharma didn't create the vaccine. Individuals did. They spent a really long time making this. In fact, these vaccines have been 35 years in the making. The mRNA technology that was discovered by a woman back in, I think it was the 60s or 70s, I'm pretty sure.
I heard an interview with this woman. She's amazing.
Amazing. That technology, she discovered it, and then she spent all of this time with her husband up until today developing this vaccine, which ended up being the Pfizer Bioentec vaccine. And yeah, it was bought by Pfizer and patented, and the patent was bought by Pfizer because Pfizer can afford the controlled randomized trials that are necessary that involve thousands and thousands and thousands of people in order to get the EUA, the emergency use approval, and the full FDA approval, which has been passed. We know this. So instead of looking at big pharma, it's someone who has literally dedicated their entire life to developing this life-saving technology. And unless they're diabolical, which they are not, this woman is the kindest person that I've ever heard speak. I'm pretty sure that they weren't doing it to harm you in any way. I'm pretty sure that they thought it through over these past 30, 40 years, you know? So,
I want to touch on, well, first of all, thank you for doing this work because I know that you're doing this out of service. I know that you've put everything else on pause and you have an interview even tomorrow on the weekend. Like I know you're also a full-time parent as well. So thank you. Some of our listeners here, Amy's here. Hi. The Bearded Mystic podcast, who I just found through your account. Wolf is here. Jules is here, says thank you so much. Excited for this conversation. Hi to you both, and thanks for being open to this conversation as a Facebook user. I'm sorry, I don't have your name. So hi to everyone. And because we're here live, feel free to put questions in the comments if that feels safe, and know that you can also reach out to Wolf in Instagram messages, DMs, if you have questions along the way, or if you're like, hey, I have this question. Do you have a guest expert who will have this answer? But I want to touch on something that I do hear. So just this week, I've heard different yoga teachers reaching out to me saying, I got vaccinated and now none of my friends will let me be around them in the yoga world. Or I got vaccinated and I don't want to tell my yoga friends. And across the board, I'm hoping that we all get to make our own choices in this. That's what I hear you saying. Or my yoga teacher is spouting like how bad the vaccine is, and I don't know how to have this tough conversation. Like, I'm not coming to your workshop unless everyone is vaccinated. So do you want to talk about the impact that this is having in the yoga world?
Yeah, it's having an immense impact. First of all, let's approach vaccine shedding. This idea that if you get vaccinated, you can then shed the virus to people. That's not factual. That is not true, point blank. The vaccine itself is made of a spike protein from a dead virus encased in a fat bubble, a lipid particle, right? That's the mRNA. And the J&J, the Johnson & Johnson, is that dead virus in case it's like the shell of the dead virus. And it dissolves into your system within 2 weeks. It's fully dissolved. And it's just meant to send your immune system information about the virus. That's what that spike protein is. So that when it comes in contact with SARS-CoV-2, it knows what to do. You can't shed a virus that you don't have. If you get vaccinated, you do not have SARS-CoV-2, you do not develop COVID-19, period, unless you're exposed to SARS-CoV-2 and you have what, I don't like that it's called a breakthrough infection, but that's what it's called. Vaccination prevents hospitalization that leads to death. That's what vaccination is meant to do. Okay, if not enough people get vaccinated, then it gives more opportunity for that virus to evolve and different variants like the Delta variant to come into play. And that shakes things up on the spike protein level, because then if you are vaccinated, you're unmasked, and you do come into contact with SARS-CoV-2, there is a chance that you're vulnerable to contracting COVID, but your symptoms would probably be mild, like my mother-in-law, Or if you're immunocompromised, like my grandmother-in-law, who recently passed after a breakthrough infection because she was one of 3 people in our family down in Louisiana who was vaccinated, then, you do have a chance of being put on a ventilator. And that's the thing that I think people don't quite understand, is that this affects more than just you. This isn't a my body, my choice situation. So when your friends who are yogis get vaccinated, they're not just doing it to protect themselves, they're doing it to protect you. When you get vaccinated, like I'm vaccinated, if I were to come into contact with SARS-CoV-2 right now, there's a chance, a small chance, very small. I'm not going to get into the numbers. It's not my job, but I have someone who will be tomorrow. Very small chance that I'm going to develop symptoms and become contagious. Okay. There's a small chance that I'm going to become contagious and also develop symptoms. If I were not vaccinated, there's a very large chance that I would get COVID. And at this point, I would probably die. So when your friend who is vaccinated is like, hey, I want to hang out, and you're not vaccinated, and you're saying, I don't want to hang out with you because you are vaccinated, but I do want to hang out with all these other unvaccinated people, you're actually kind of screwing yourself over, because your friend who's vaccinated, much less likely that you're going to catch COVID from them than all of your unvaccinated, unmasked friends. That's a fact. You can look at my IGT live conversations that I've had with experts about that. Please get off of YouTube. I know that we're on YouTube right now, but please get off of YouTube, get off of social media, and call your doctor. If you don't have a doctor, you can go on your state website, and they have tons of information on SARS-CoV-2 and COVID-19 and vaccination there to help you sort through the facts. You can even DM me if you choose to stay on social media, and we can have this conversation. But ultimately, if you're a yogi, if you're a yoga practitioner, if you're going to yoga classes, the more people who are vaccinated and wearing masks right now, because of Delta, because of what we are seeing happening within our communities, and because of the overflow in our hospitals, which was completely unnecessary, didn't have to happen. And it's because not enough people got vaccinated. That's not placing blame. That's just a fact. Okay. I want you to, anytime I say something, I'm not blaming anybody. I'm just giving out the facts. I want for people to go and practice yoga. I want for people to go and practice yoga in person. I myself am choosing not to, because I have a long list of reasons why. One of them being that my kid is not yet vaccinated. But if you do so, please be vaccinated. Please wear a mask. And if you're of the mindset that vaccinated people are causing or prolonging this pandemic, I need you to sit with the discomfort of maybe the possibility that it's not them. They're actually trying to end it. It's people who are choosing not to vaccinate and also choosing not to wear masks. So.
You mentioned getting off of social media and getting off of YouTube, and a really close friend of mine identifies as vaccine hesitant, and was saying, like, one of the scariest, most harmful places that they are seeing right now is social media, is YouTube. And I think it's confusing for people when they see, like, this doctor or this nurse is speaking out. And Drew spoke to this in our last live, saying, yes, and 97% of healthcare professionals are saying something different. Like, what do you say when people are, it's like, who do you listen to? How do you choose who you listen to? People who are more so really hesitant or against vaccinations are saying, these doctors and nurses are being silenced. So how do we choose the experts that we are listening to?
How I choose the experts that I'm listening to are the people who put forth information that has been peer reviewed, that there have been ample studies and lots of research and data collected. And a lot of people who I listen to are medical experts, they're ICU doctors, ICU nurses who are experiencing the effects of COVID firsthand by watching patient after patient after patient die over a span of now years. And virologists, immunologists, gene therapy experts, people who have a hand in actually making and developing vaccines. And someone, I am looking in the comments, someone was like, it's important to address the other vaccines. The mRNA is different. Yes, they are. The mRNA is different from Johnson and Johnson. A lot of people who are vaccine hesitant are more likely to get the J&J because it's not new technology. A lot of people are afraid of the mRNA because there's been so much misinformation surrounding it. If you want to learn the difference from the mouth of someone who develops vaccines, go to my IGTV conversations. It's one of my first ones with Annika Evans, Dr. Annika Evans. She's a gene therapist and a virologist. She is incredible. Her screen name, her handle is @ScienceWithAnnie, ANNI. And she's fantastic. This is all on Instagram that I'm doing this. I don't have Facebook. She breaks down the difference between the vaccines in a way that I'm not able to for you, and I don't want to confuse anybody. So please go to that conversation, and she's the best teacher ever. I love
Is
it.
this, did I write this right?
That's correct. Yes.
Science with Annie?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, perfect.
That's her on Instagram. That conversation that I've had with her, and if you choose to follow her, you'll learn even more. So this is what I do every day is people ask me these questions and I'm like, hey, I'm not an expert, but I tap my friend on the shoulder and I'm like, I have the perfect person for you. So, and my role is necessary, I've realized, because a lot of people don't know who to go to or how to access this information because they're within communities that are getting all of their misinformation from memes, from quack doctors who are financially benefiting off of their, sale of supplements and alternative nutrition, alternative practices, alternative lifestyles, alternative health. That's where they're, seeing a lot of misinformation and gathering this misinformation and taking it as information because they're within groups and communities, yoga, spiritual wellness communities, where their leaders or the people in their groups are, vulnerable to this and are spreading it around because they take it as truth. It's not true. And that's really hard. It's really hard for people to understand, what's true and what's not, especially when there's an echo chamber around you.
Yeah, this is so important. Thank you for that. I'm also thinking of when we see like teachers that we've learned from, leaders that we've learned from, or something on, something shared on social media, and you're like, gosh, that doesn't look right. Like this week, Dr. Jen Gunter took on the whole discussion around please don't soak tampons in ivermectin and insert them vaginally. I mean, this shouldn't ever have to be a public service announcement. What do we do as individuals when we see harmful misinformation shared? Do we step back and think, I don't want to touch this? Like sometimes we don't have energy to do that, or this isn't within my scope of practice. I'm not the expert. But then also on the other side of it is if this spreads around, it's harming people.
Mm-hmm.
So how do we know what to do there?
if your friend on Facebook or on Instagram is like, soak some tampons in ivermectin and shove them up your vag, you should report that like immediately. You should enlist your group of friends who you know will be like, yeah, that's misinformation, and ask them to report it immediately. The more people who tackle that and report it at once, the better. Also, the more people who block that person, the better, because then that information, it will signal to Instagram, it will signal to Facebook to remove that information, to remove that post, or to remove that account entirely if they're, repeat offenders. If it's a friend and you see it and your eyes go wide and your stomach falls out of your butt, I have been there. And I have reached out to those people. And at the beginning, I did not reach out in an awesome way. To be very transparent with you, this work that I am doing right now, like, it's at first, it was full of a lot of fire and a lot of opposition and a lot of me not coming at it from a really compassionate place or perspective. This was earlier on in the pandemic because I myself was scared because I understood what happens when misinformation spreads. Like, I was like seeing the future. I was seeing where we are now. Over the past, I would say, 6 months, I have learned a lot. My cousin has a master's in public health. She teaches and is a guest lecturer at many a university when it comes to talking to people, and she goes to nurses' colleges and talks to nurses about how to talk to your patients about getting vaccinated. And so I sat in on a lot of her lectures, and I've learned a great deal. And one thing that I have learned is if you confront a person that you love, and because that passion and that love for them is there, if you confront them with a lot of fire, they're going to. Instead, I like to ask, hey, where did you see and where did you get this information? And how do you know for sure that this is true, that this is real? Get curious. The more curious you can get with the people in your life who are really close to you and who are spreading misinformation, are vaccine hesitant, are on the fence, or are sort of leaning toward that I don't ever want to get vaccinated, I'm never going to get vaccinated, vaccines are bad, the more curious you can get with that, the more you can explore with an open mind, the more you are willing to learn from them, more they will be open to learn and listen to you. So you let them share all of, their sources that they've had. And then you share all of your sources that you have that subtly and sometimes blatantly counter the misinformation that has been ringing around inside of their head and on their screen as they're scrolling. And sometimes you'll get opposition. Sometimes people will be like, haha, that's funny. But I guarantee you that stays in their head. Like, that conversation that they had with you stays in their head. It impacts them. And it allows them the space to understand that they could possibly be wrong, and that it's okay if they're listening to people or absorbing misinformation that is wrong. Okay? You create like a two-way street of compassion, and the more and more they hear it from more and more sources, particularly from sources who love them in a compassionate, kind, gentle way, the more likely they are to schedule an appointment to get the shot. or the more likely they are to stop following people on social media or extract themselves or move themselves from a group that is propagating and promoting the spread of this misinformation, this harmful misinformation that is killing people. Like, treating SARS-CoV-2 and COVID-19 with, I'm sorry, with a parasite drug, which,
Right.
virus is different from a parasite. Virus is different from a parasite. You cannot, there was a whole study done. You cannot, it doesn't work. Okay. It flopped. Actually, Drew Hume did a great little thing yesterday where he talked about how petri dishes work and how those studies are just, it was just nonsense, the ivermectin study. But yeah,
Yes.
that's how you go about it. Please, if you are going to trust someone telling you to eat, swallow, take, or shove a drug up your hoo-ha that has no evidence for actually helping, rather than go to, your healthcare provider and get a vaccine that billions of people have had and have, minimal to no side effects and only only has really helped and not really harmed. You've got to see that there's some sort of discrepancy here. Use your discernment, please. Another thing is people will be like, oh, but on VAERS, VAERS, which is adverse, I'm losing the acronym here, but that's the acronym, VAERS. A lot of people will throw that out there. It's a place where anyone can report anything on any vaccine ever. And it stays up on a board, and its sole purpose is for people from the FDA and medical researchers to go and sift through all of those reports and see if there are multiple, of the same report, and then study that and prove it to be false. That's the reason why VAERS exists. I could go on there right now and I could write Nicki Minaj's cousin's best friend, his balls swelled up because he got vaccinated, which we know now is not true. I could go and write that and it would stay on there. It would stay on.
I love how you also said this week, I saw you say somewhere I saw you say, I could write on there that getting the vaccine made me able to fly.
Made me able to fly. I could write any ridiculous shit on there.
Right.
It's not a reliable source. VAERS is not a reliable source. VAERS is not a reliable source. If people are using VAERS as a source to try to sway you, if you are vaccine hesitant, run and hide. Run to the hills and hide. Go and ask an ICU nurse what they're doing for their patients right now and how many of their patients wish they had gotten vaccinated who are about to die. Go do that. Go do that instead.
Yeah.
So
Lynn is here and saying important work. Thank you for your courage. I agree. I think it takes a lot of courage. I realized in the backlash of just a post and an email and Drew's, the podcast that I did with Drew, I got a lot of nasty comments in a hurry. And so I want to applaud you for this. And I also want to say, I was thinking about this because I'm very much about scope of practice, stay in your own lane. And yoga teachers talk all the time about how we can help the planet or use less plastic, because climate change experts have told us, hey, this is something we really have to be aware of.
This is no different.
It is the same.
No different. It is within your scope of practice. You know, how many times have we gone into a yoga class where a yoga teacher is being wicked irresponsible? I'm from Maine, so I can say wicked. They're being wicked friggin' irresponsible by throwing their students into a back bend like Urdhva Dhanurasana when their students aren't warm for that sort of spinal extension, where they don't have that sort of mobility. And how often do we get pissed because they're spouting pseudoscience, okay? That's what we're seeing here with the vaccine. If you want to talk health and wellness, if you want to talk yoga and yoking, if you want to talk ahimsa and non-harm, if you want to talk seva, if you want to talk svadhyaya and self-study, then it's time for you to step off of your mat and go out into the world and practice your yoga and stop being irresponsible about it. And if you are nervous to call out people within the yoga community or to have hard conversations with people within the yoga community or to call forward people within the yoga community for spouting misinformation, for being confused over misinformation, for any reason that is, you know, continuing to prolong this pandemic, like, you got to get over that right quick. You just do. If you're worried about losing followers because you have a lot of followers, if you're worried about losing students or whatever, guess what? If you don't say something, there's a huge chance that you're going to lose them anyway because they're going to frickin' die. Period. And I, you know, people get really shocked by me. They think just because I'm doing this work, it means that I'm like love and light and everything. No, bitch. I'm not. Like, and I don't have to be. I'm not here to be nice. Being nice and being kind are two different things. Nice is fake, kind is real. I am saying this from the depth of my heart. All right. And I have a big old heart. I actually have a heart condition because my heart is so large. Like, for real. I don't care politically what you believe in. I don't care religiously what you believe in, okay? I care about your life. It doesn't matter if you agree with me or disagree. It doesn't matter if you hate me. I care about you staying alive and making it through this pandemic. I care about your loved ones staying alive and making it through this pandemic. I'm gonna do whatever I can do as a yoga teacher, a retired yoga teacher, as a writer, as someone who is an activist, as someone who is a public speaker, as someone who works in social justice. I care immensely. I'm not getting paid a dime for any of this. I'm not brainwashed. I just don't want you to die. And if you don't get vaccinated, if you don't wear a mask, there's a humongous chance that you will catch COVID. You will catch SARS-CoV-2. You will develop symptoms of COVID-19, and there will not be room for you in a hospital. You will die, or you will end up with lifelong health problems.
I appreciate that you are doing this work out of, and you're saying like care and also speaking up. And I want to challenge anyone. I want to challenge this because Sean and I were having this discussion today about the difference between male doctors, people who identify as male doctors, scientists, researchers, journalists, individuals walking the planet, are getting called out less for speaking up than women are. Sean sees it. Journalists, he said it's very rare for him as a scientific journalist to get called out or to get, you know, as many hate messages. And so let's dig into, if that made you uncomfortable for a minute, let's dig into why
I've been
that
called
might
an annoying bitch my whole life. I've been called an annoying bitch since I was 5 years old. I make good arguments. I'm smart. People
Yes.
have a problem with that. Let them.
You do some amazing work, Wolf, and I'm so excited about this. One Facebook user is saying mRNA is newer, better technology.
It is. It's so much better. There's so much hope with mRNA. There's so much hope there. And remember, for those who are, spiritually and magically minded like myself, please remember that magic is just science that hasn't been explained yet. One of my really, really good friends, the maker of this shirt, is a spiritual scientist. Okay? Like, science and magic are intertwined. So if you believe in magic, if you're witchy like that, if you're all into your herbs and stuff, mRNA is like the coolest new potion out there.
You also talk on your podcast, speaking of like leaning into the magic and the, I'm going to call it more woo side of things. You also talk about leaning into the spiritual side. You had Dr.
Oh yeah,
Yaz.
and I don't have a podcast. It's my IG live, Dr. Yaz. Yeah, and she's a Jesus follower. She's like, I'm a believer. I'm a
Yes.
like yeah, like spiritual communities right now are really struggling, particularly New Age spirituality and Christianity. Evangelicals are struggling with misinformation surrounding the vaccine or the COVID-19 vaccines and surrounding vaccination at large within their communities. All right, there's a Venn diagram, and she and I sit right in the middle of it. And it's very interesting. It's very interesting to compare the pushback that she's getting and the pushback that I've gotten, and that many within the yoga and wellness worlds who are pro-vax or who do support vaccination have gotten vaccinated. We've come across a lot of similar sentiment and argument, and I shouldn't really say argument, but just different points of view within our communities. And we've gotten a lot of pushback. We've gotten a lot of like hateful, hurtful messages, and I know you've experienced them too. I mean, I think honestly, like, for a lot of us who exist in these spiritual communities, specifically New Age spirituality, New Age, or yogic spirituality and philosophy, and the evangelical faith, evangelical Christianity, it's really hard because both groups are quite cult-like. Like, I remember a time when I was very well on my way to being indoctrinated into some weird stuff that, like, I look back and I'm like, God, like, that's strange. Like, yikes. Good thing I had a quick save there, but it's just, it's part of, I think it's part of how these communities have developed within westernized yoga, westernized religion, and how they've sort of verged off of the path of the true meaning of those things. And for those of us who continue on the path of like truly being able to yoke, like it's this and this instead of either or, I can drink my green juice and get vaccinated, right? Like, I can do both of those things. And like, I can practice yoga and get vaccinated. I can go to church and I can get vaccinated. I think it's just the deep polarization and the binary that exists within our world at large, which is brought on by white supremacist capitalism, and white supremacist ideology over centuries. It's just it's sort of a tool of colonization where they created either or. circumstance, and they condition us to believe that there are only two options when really, as you said in your intro, like there's a whole variety, there's a whole spectrum, right?
Yeah. That's
So,
the one that's the one thing, that there are so many varieties of this. I love that you address this. Also, someone is saying here, "I have a lot of questions for you, Wolf. I'll be reaching out."
okay.
And this is good. Like, I love that you also addressed that you came into this with a lot of fire and that didn't work so well at the
Oh my
beginning, and that now you're getting curious and asking questions. I'd love to hear from our people who are here live. Thank you so much for being here. Um, how are you having conversations? What is working? What is helping to decrease that polarization that Wolf talked about?
God.
And I think the last question for Wolf and all of us here is, how are you taking care of yourself when we do, like, pop onto social media and sometimes get hit with things that feel really triggering, upsetting, polarizing, or we have a conversation, or we see something in the news, or you're just like working endlessly on this. How are you taking care of yourself, and do you have any suggestions when you're right in the middle of it?
Well, my first one, I don't suggest this. This is just number one. I am on Lexapro. It's great. um, because I have chronic anxiety and depression. Number two, I have a toddler who takes up a lot of my time and a lot of my energy and a lot of my focus. And most of the time, I am not zoomed in on like every single thing that's happening on social media. Like, I put my phone down and I have to like help my kid get a snack. We have to go for a walk. I have to make sure that he doesn't try and go meet Jesus because he likes to catapult himself off of things. Number three, I am a plant lady. So I have a lot of plants. There's some in the background here, one there. I have way more upstairs. And number four, I have a really great support system. I have a lot of really good friends, and I've made a lot of really great friends through this. And it's really important to have a support system of people who you can talk to and vent to about stuff. I also have an amazing therapist. Um, I take good care of myself. I have filters on, my Instagram that block out harmful words, harmful language. And things that are questionable that Instagram knows based off of the things that I've written down and things that I don't want to see, they know to hide from me. So, yeah, I have really strong boundaries, guys. Like, that's a huge thing. And it takes a lot of time for you to know what your boundaries are and what they need to be. So, that's how I take care of myself. That's how I do it. I meet amazing people like you, Shannon, and I have great conversations with amazing people like you every single day. There is so much joy in this work. There really is, because you get to connect with people, and at the end of the day, you know that you're doing this because you just want people to be able to live healthy, whole lives, and that we truly are all in this together. And it really, really makes a difference. Just one small conversation makes a world of difference and quite literally saves lives.
Thank you so much, Wolf, for being here, for spending Friday. Like, it's Friday evening for me. It's getting late on a Friday for you, and I'm just glad that we could hang out together and talk about this. And for any of you who have been in the if you have more questions, or there's like something that felt like I have more questions, or I have more thoughts, or we've not touched on this perspective, this is the way the conversation goes. Like, let's be in conversation. Let's get curious together. Elliot says, I'm the opposite of Wolf. I was more patient and understanding at the beginning, but it's been going on too long. There's too much unnecessary suffering and death. And let's, like, in those moments, let's support each other when we hit that wall of like, oh my gosh, I need to take a break or I need to step back. I'm at this level of frustration. Reach out to your friends, please.
And also,
Yeah.
yeah, taking breaks and like having your strong pandemic boundaries is sometimes really helpful. Watching a silly show, or I'm actually about to go tonight. We have our D&D Dungeons and Dragons group coming over. It's my sister-in-law and my best friend. We're just gonna sit outside and be goofy, but like remove yourself from being the point person, even if it's just for an hour, for all of these conversations. I'm sorry you're struggling, Elliot. Like, I know what it is like to just be like, this is too much. You know, I'm not going to recommend Lexapro, but I am going to say it's been a great summer, guys.
Yeah, and I appreciate you saying, like, take a break from things, find something that's funny. I've been listening to comedy podcasts. Elliot's been sharing Canadian memes with me. Elliot saying, "Oh, I'm already medicated." I appreciate that you're also normalizing medication and mental health. Thank you.
Guys, I medicate and I meditate every day.
That's amazing. Yeah. So I would love to know in the comments as well, you know, what brings you some joy right now? Like what are you watching that's funny or uplifting? We all know that. We all need that as well. Thank you everyone for being here live or for the replay. Thank you again, Wolf. This has been amazing.
Oh, Shannon, thank you. You're amazing. You are so much fun to chat with, and I'm excited because we get to be friends now.
That's
Like,
right.
it's done. We're friends.
Yes. Someone else is saying truth is truth. Thanks. All right. Take care, everyone.
Take care.